Let's imagine an autonomous system deployed in a completely hostile environment. It's operating continuously for decades, and there is absolutely zero human intervention. No caretakers. So how on earth does it survive the relentless physical decay of the universe? Well, today in this explainer, we're doing a complete teardown of exactly that. How non-biological systems survive the inescapable forces of entropy. We're going to dive into a seriously groundbreaking white paper by Juvenal Hernando Brinas Bobe. It introduces what's called the Entropic Persistence Framework. Think of it as this uncompromising, rigid architectural blueprint for engineering long-term autonomous survival. Okay, let's dive right into this. Look at this quote from Erwin Schrödinger. It's not just some abstract biological philosophy, it is a harsh, inescapable physical truth. Entropy destroying closed systems? Yeah, that's not a metaphor. It is literally the second law of thermodynamics. If a system is going to maintain order over time, it absolutely must have a continuous energy budget, a way to repair its own information, a mechanism to adapt, and some kind of governance process. Because the absolute second that energy input stops, boom, the second law reasserts itself and the system dies. It's that simple.
So you might be wondering, how do we actually build artificial systems that can survive without us holding their hands? Because right now, our engineering approaches are frankly completely siloed. You've got infrastructure engineers stressing out over hardware reliability, AI safety researchers laser-focused on goal alignment, and distributed systems engineers building consensus protocols in their own little bubbles. None of these disciplines are talking to each other, and because of that, they completely fail to unify against this baseline thermodynamic reality. If we want truly autonomous, long-duration entities, we need a fundamentally new approach. Here is the architectural blueprint for today's explainer. First, we'll cover the physics of persistence, then the 6-layer EPF stack. After that, we'll look at core learning and agency, run through the Bitcoin survival analogy, discuss safety and self-modification, and wrap up with engineering autonomous survival. All right, section 1, the physics of persistence. Before we can even think about building the stack, we absolutely have to acknowledge the foundational physics here. We have to treat computation not as some abstract digital magic, but as a deeply physical process that is bound by strict thermodynamic laws. Every single time a system erases a bit of information, it dissipates heat. That's a hard constraint known as Landauer's limit. This isn't just a pesky engineering hurdle, it's literally a law of physics dictating how any persistent system has to operate. And that brings us to the unified solution we've been looking for, the Entropic Persistence Framework. The EPF is a 6-layer reference architecture, but here's the kicker. It treats survival and persistence not as an afterthought, not as some nice-to-have reliability feature, but as the absolute primary design objective. Every single capability of the system derives from its ability to survive first. If it can't survive, nothing else matters. To put this into perspective and really understand why this is so absolutely crucial, check out this specific field data from Schroeder and her colleagues. They analyzed DRAM hardware in production environments and found between 0.22 and 2.5 uncorrectable memory errors per billion device hours. Think about what that means. Without active intervention, entropy is literally eating your hardware for breakfast. You simply must establish baseline survival mechanisms before you even think about deploying your shiny new AI software. Moving right along to section 2, the 6-layer EPF stack. Let's deconstruct the actual EPF architecture, building it strictly from the physical substrate way at the bottom all the way up to high-level governance. Okay, here's the complete 6-layer stack, and notice how it beautifully mirrors biological necessity. At the very bottom, layer 0 handles raw thermodynamics and the physical substrate, literally harvesting the energy needed to live. As we move up, layer 1 handles information integrity. Layer 2 manages core learning, layer 3 deals with embodiment, layer 4 introduces agency, and finally, layer 5 manages federation and evolution. It's a two-way street too. Energy flows relentlessly upward from layer 0, while rules and governance flow downward from layer 5. Let's look a bit closer at layer 0, because honestly, this is where the rubber meets the road. We're talking active memory scrubbing, radiation hardening, power bridging. These are not optional bells and whistles. They are the absolute minimal baseline for survival. Why? Well, because a computing substrate with perfect, state-of-the-art hardware but zero energy budget is totally indistinguishable from a very expensive paperweight. If layer 0 fails, the whole shebang instantly collapses. Game over.
Now, what's really interesting here is how Layer 1 strictly maps specific consensus mechanisms right to the trust topology of the network. A massive, massive mistake in distributed systems engineering is treating consensus protocols as if they're just interchangeable parts. They are not. If your state is convergent, you use CRDTs. If it's a known group with partial trust, use practical Byzantine fault tolerance. And if it's an open, trustless network, you absolutely must use Nakamoto consensus. Hitting the nail on the head here is vital, because choosing the wrong mechanism doesn't just cause a little glitch, it introduces fatal liveness or safety failures that will literally kill the organism.
Which brings us to Section 3, core learning and agency. Once our system actually has energy and mathematical integrity locked down, we can safely move up the stack to layers 2, 3, and 4. This is where we start seeing how the system adapts and plans, all without violating those strict thermodynamic constraints we just established. This introduces a genuinely brilliant concept at Layer 4 called Thermo-time scheduling. Think about it for a second. An AI deciding to do a massive, computationally expensive neural weight update during a solar energy deficit? That is essentially choosing to freeze to this while trying to learn how to play chess. It makes no sense. Thermo-time scheduling prevents this kind of operational suicide by forcing the system to schedule heavy cognitive tasks only during periods of energy surplus. It's exactly the same way biological metabolisms hold off on heavy growth and repair until calories are abundant. All right, moving into Section 4, the Bitcoin survival analogy. To really prove that these foundational layers actually work out there in the wild, let's do a postmortem of sorts on an alien machine that's already surviving right in front of us. Bitcoin. If we walk through this matrix and actually diagnose Bitcoin using the EPF stack, it's incredibly revealing. Now, obviously, Bitcoin is not biological life, but it operates perfectly as a non-biological organism. Just look at its compliance. It has over 15 years of incredibly strong compliance at Layer 1 with its proof of work integrity and at Layer 5 with its governance proposal process. And get this, it does all of that despite having essentially zero cognitive capabilities or agency at Layers 2 and 4. It just mindlessly, relentlessly harvests energy and maintains perfect integrity. So the crucial point here is this stark contrast between load-bearing and adaptive layers. Layers 0, 1, and 5, those are load-bearing. They provide energy, integrity, and governance. They are completely, utterly non-negotiable. Now, layers 2, 3, and 4, those are adaptive. They give a system its intelligence and capability, but not its existence. Bitcoin proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that a system can survive for decades without ever adapting, but no system, no matter how hyper-intelligent it is, can survive for even a millisecond without energy, integrity, and governance. Section 5. Safety in self-modification. So what happens when an autonomous system actually gets smart enough to want to upgrade itself? Well, we have to address the extreme danger of Layer 5 governance. Because if a system can self-modify, it risks accidentally corrupting its own core constitutional state and basically destroying itself from the inside out. Let's look at how this builds a strict engineered safety rail against lethal, unchecked self-modification. Any protocol upgrade has to pass through this rigorous 4-step staged rollout: shadow, canary, cohort, and finally global. Take the canary phase, for example. If even a single thermodynamic metric at Layer 0 drops, like say, the system suddenly starts using 5% more power than expected, bam, automatic rollback is triggered. This enforces an unbreakable rule. An optimization at a higher layer is literally never allowed to threaten the physical survival of the substrate at Layer 0. Finally, Section 6, Engineering Autonomous Survival. As we bring this explainer to a close, the overarching goal for systems engineers is becoming crystal clear. We can no longer design AI models in a vacuum, completely ignoring the physical hardware they run on or the governance structures that keep them alive. Designing true long-duration entities means we have to integrate all 6 layers into one unified architecture. And this quote right here brilliantly illustrates our final, biggest takeaway. A system can persist without adapting. It cannot persist without energy, integrity, and governance. As engineers push closer and closer toward truly autonomous systems, we absolutely have to remember that thermodynamics doesn't make exceptions for silicon. So I'll leave you with this. How does your current architecture measure up against the stack? If the plug was pulled on all human caretakers today, what layer would your system die at? It's a pretty provocative question for sure, but it's one we all need to start answering.